Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I am Asmara Mitchell, your host, and this is the Queenie for President YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thank you. Today's video is moving on to the more podcasty stuff and social issues and things that directly or indirectly affect me and my household. I'm going to talk a little bit today about exploitation and youth violence, I think. So I'm going to explain why each of the topics are important to me, and then I'm going to explain what each of those mean in the general sense, and then I'm going to try and unpick a little bit how perhaps you, the viewer, could use your newfound understanding, or what you already know of the topics to help people around you or even to make changes in your own households. So, first of all, exploitation is a subject close to me because it's a very unfortunate thing that happens. It makes a lot of victims and a lot of criminals out of very innocent people from very early on, and these are usually people who are not at the stage of maturity to make their own decisions. So by the time you find you've been exploited or you were exploited, you're probably knee deep in some stuff that is very difficult to get out of. And I think that those people experience such much misfortune. And once the authorities, the police, your parents, your schools, your community leaders get involved, those people are no longer viewed as victims. At that point, they're viewed as criminals, and that's often the point when some of these perpetrators are found, at the point when it's too late for them. And rehabilitation is as difficult as it is, we know already, and we know that often these people become reoffenders because the walls do close in on them, and the options do become fewer and fewer. And as a community leader myself, and somebody who likes to think they look out for each and every child or individual that they come across, especially vulnerable ones, I would like to think I offer support and help to those people. I want to share some of my techniques and some of my understanding of that topic. Yes, I grew up to feel like, you know what, you may have been a victim of exploitation yourself in so many ways, um because there are so many different types of exploitation. I may or may have been approached by people who, you know, take people off the streets, take vulnerable people and use them. I may have been a victim of that on multiple occasions and not even realized. And upon reflection, I look at some of my friends growing up and people whose behavior I misunderstood. People I thought, well, why are you doing that? Why don't you just do the right thing, go to school? Why don't you, you don't realize the psychology behind the exploitation. And obviously, by its nature, exploitation is another person using somebody who is vulnerable. So the fact that I didn't view those people as vulnerable at the time, I feel I owe it to some of those people to really explain the lifestyle and really explain what I now know. And I'm kicking myself that I wasn't able to help more of those people at that age. Obviously, I had a lack of resource myself, and I was also trying to get away from exploitation. And lastly, on the topic, none of us are safe from exploitation. Even somebody you think is living very comfortably, um, or relatively safe or remotely from trouble, you could be exploited in so many ways. Even the internet, people are directly contacting strangers on the internet and forcing them and using them to do things, stealing money from them, causing them to conduct illegal activities without knowing what they're doing. um and all of that counts as exploitation. So as I said, I'm not just talking about those people that I know personally. I'm not talking about people who are currently experiencing exploitation. I'm also talking about each individual who has to stay vigilant and has to be looking out for the signs and symptoms of people entering our communities and exploiting each other. So yeah, I do want to open that discussion. And I think that is a big one. And it's not, again, as with a lot of the topics I've introduced in my videos, it's not just something that's going to be discussed once and buried, because these things are constantly evolving, and we want to stay on top of it. Um, and next, the topic of youth violence. So youth violence, again, is very broad. It involves a lot of people, and the thing is with youth violence that I think is so scary is that because a youth can be defined as someone who's very young, and also somebody who is relatively well expected to be past the age of maturity, because that whole category of people can be regarded as youth. You can imagine what youth violence how it presents itself in communities, and what it means for all of the individuals involved. So essentially what I'm saying is, somebody who's in their 20s could be conducting violent activities on somebody who hasn't even reached their teens, and it's all considered youth violence. And until we take the lid off of this box that youth violence has been put in, and really start to work out who the individuals are, and what the different characteristics, traits, and some of the intent and intentions of the individuals, I think it will always remain slightly a mystery, and it will always be something that we cannot predict. I.e., when some of these events are occurring on the streets, a lot of parents and people who are supposed to be protecting youth, they're usually quite shocked. And I think that's one of the worst aspects of youth violence, is the shock that comes once something truly horrendous has happened. The shock that occurs when a parent gets a phone call to say your child's been arrested for stealing, or for engaging in serious youth violence, or has been caught with a weapon. It's the shock and the ripple effect in the community, and it's the fact that either we're all turning a blind eye and pretending, oh no, we had no idea that individual was at risk, or we genuinely are like, I didn't know. I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't know that they were living this lifestyle that was going to lead to this. So for me, youth violence is such a mystery still in our community, that it does need to be unpicked and unpacked. And again, with identifying the individuals, this is something I talk about throughout my videos, is identifying the people who are at risk, identifying the people involved, having some idea of what exactly is going on, and trying to predict these events before they're happening, and getting involved, and sending in the right people to help prevent things from happening and escalating. So that's really my motivation for the two subjects. And again, it's even just talking about it out loud, you can, for me, you can feel the vibe of the whole situation is just so massive. It's so beyond one person. Myself, I could never sit here and cover everything that's involved in this. But I'm gonna try and go by the definitions that are currently online with the World Health Organization and other agencies, and try to go from there and see whether, as I said, this relates to things that I've understood or that I know, and see if I can add any extra understanding to it. So to start with, exploitation, and then this is particularly, again, exploitation of young people. I know I said that we are all potentially victims of exploitation, but we're just going to go by, you've got like the NSPCC here, you've got safeguardingchildren.co.uk, you've got Barnardo's, Action for Children, the police, of course, and the Children's Society. So the immediate thing is, a lot of these organizations and charities are aware. They are trying to push the definitions out there, and they're trying to encourage people to educate themselves on what youth exploitation involves, and what potentially those signs are. So these definitions, I think, are usually geared at parents and carers and schools and people who interact with children on a daily basis. But again, as I said, as we're all waking up to our responsibilities in our community, and we're trying to do more, this is also for people who are not interacting with children, do not have children, do not work with children, but you live on a street or an estate or an area where there are loads of children, and you see things, and well, actually, if I did this or I provided this service, as small as your contribution is, you could make a difference. So this goes out to everybody, not just parents, because sometimes parents, the thing is, our children are mostly trying to hide from us. They're mostly trying to cover up their behavior from us. And so, as much as the definitions are geared towards us, a lot of their behavior is being covered up and masked once they enter the door, once they get home, once they're in their bedrooms. So, and I'm not taking away the responsibility of parents. I'm just saying we do need support for families. So, criminal exploitation is child abuse, and it is specifically where children and young people are manipulated and coerced into committing crimes. Um, this can be in the form of gangs, peer groups, or organized criminal gangs. Now, my thing is the organized criminal gangs, um, because I think it's a trickle down effect. I think when organized criminal gangs, have been operating for a long time in their city, they're often recruiting young people, and where jobs are scarce and education is not far reaching for these children, it is an attractive lifestyle. And what happens, I think, from the trickle down effect is people are sent out into communities and have a wider understanding of crime, and they are enticing children into doing things, starting from activities that seem fairly meaningless, like even getting into a fight with somebody, even causing trouble in your local town centre. So these children are being influenced through multiple streams of communication. It's not just somebody walking up to a child and saying, we want you to do this. These organized gangs have their own TikTok accounts. They pay for advertising on social media. They can host radio networks where they're encouraging artists and things. This is what organized criminal gangs are. It's sometimes it's the studios where people are recording their music. It's happening at youth clubs. It's happening at schools. And with the schools things, this is one of my probably more controversial conspiracy theories, but I do have some experience with this, that some people are sent into schools with fake details. And I think this is something that the police and the schools haven't picked up on yet. They're saying they're certain ages, they're coming through with all the paperwork necessary, and they're entering schools as older children who are influencing younger ones. And I'm just going to put that out there plainly. Crucify me if you want about that, but I do believe that is something that has happened in multiple schools, especially inner city schools in London. And I think that's how a lot of them get to see who, one on one, who the vulnerable children are. Um, and yeah, that's where the NSPCC goes on to talk about recruitment. So that's my thing that I think has not been brought into the topic about recruitment. Again, all of this is happening outside of parents' knowledge, you know, and NSPCC goes on to talk about, I'll be putting the links into the description for you to go on and have a read, but they go on to talk about the dangers of exploitation. And we know that one of the worst things that could happen to a child is losing their opportunities, ending up in jail very early on, and only having an option of a life of crime, because it's difficult for them to re-engage with normal education. It's difficult for them to re-engage in society and to say, well, I want to become some big top, somebody, lawyer, banker, and I've got this criminal past. So we know that that's one of the worst things that could happen to our children. But another thing, is with exploitation, the NSPCC is bringing forward this topic of actual. I don't know if I'm allowed to say certain words. So, the abuse and physical harm, and we know that this is happening in the case of both boys and girls. And I do want to highlight the fact that, and bring into the conversation, that a lot of young boys have experienced sexual abuse and have never and have intended to never speak about it. And that is something that is used to exert pressure on those individuals because of the shame, the threats that come with it. and the general aspect of violence. So I again want to bring that into the conversation, that when we are talking about actual exploitation for children, it's not just girls, it's boys as well. Um, and the perpetrators of this can sometimes be other children. It's not just this old guy sitting somewhere who's been doing this for years and has never been caught by the police. We're talking about children who have been groomed to groom other children, in schools, in the bathrooms at schools, on the way home in parks and things like that. So essentially, parents have a tough job of trying to keep an eye on their children. So what I wanted to bring in now quickly is I'm going to do a quick insert for parents to see how they can attach their phones to their children's phones. If you haven't done it already, it's something you should be doing. If you have iPhone or Android, there are two different ways you can insert your children's ID into your phone, send them the link, and they can you can check out their phone usage, the websites they're on. You can set limits, which is what I think everybody should be doing. And I know when children get to a certain age and they start becoming a bit manipulative and can kind of work their way around you and say, "Oh, well, I need this app. How dare you try to, stop me? It's not fair. Everyone else is using it." Well, at the end of the day, if we group together as parents and decide these apps do need to have restrictions placed on them, because at the end of the day, if your children are not don't have a business, they're not earning any money, they don't own any property, they really shouldn't have the sole rights to decide what they're doing on their phones. So you do need to use your Google Family link, or go into your iPhone settings and set your the boundaries on the phones for the children and look at what they are doing. If you haven't done it already and you feel a bit uncomfortable, like, well, I don't even want to know, which is what a lot of people are doing. I'm going to turn a blind eye. They're nearly old enough. Now is the time. That mentality, you need to throw it in the bin. Either 15, 16, 17, 18. Tell your children you need to see what they're doing on their phone, and they need support using these devices. They need to be taught how to use their devices properly, and that will remain your job until your child is fully independent. So that would also include, in particular, I would say Snapchat. Snapchat is a very dangerous app because of the disappearing chats, because it's just so easy to add strangers on there. It's so easy to have a unidentifiable profile. It's so easy to pretend to be someone else on there, and it's so easy to get away with things on Snapchat seemingly. So please be looking at your children's Snapchats. There's the trafficking, the county lines, and the carrying of weapons. County lines has been in the news a lot. If your children disappear, you've got big problems. That's something you need to be. I'm sure any parent is dealing with the police once their children have started running away and going out of London by themselves. I don't feel like I have to have a long conversation about that. But with the carrying of weapons, you need to be searching your children's property, the belongings you have purchased for them, bags, under their beds, some places in your garden. You need to be looking around the front by the bins. You need to be looking in their wardrobes, checking their bags, before they're going and coming back from school, particularly when they get in. You don't have to attack your children and tell them, "Give me your bag. I need to." You say to them, "Tomorrow, we're going to be doing a bag search." Do not alarm your children. Do not provoke your children, because you don't know what situations they found themselves in. You tell your children, "Tomorrow afternoon when you get home, I'd like to search your belongings to see when you come in what sort of things you're bringing in, just to check you're okay." And it's something that all the parents online are coming together to do now, and it's my duty as a mother to do that. You show them this video and you let them know I said, if you have difficulties with your children, you need to approach the authorities and tell them, "I'm losing control of my child and I need people to come in and help me." You cannot be ashamed to do that, because you are assisting your child in throwing their life away. So make the right choices as parents. You can't be scared of your children at the end of the day, and searching your bags for weapons is going to be a primary thing. If your children are carrying weapons because they're scared, you need to get your children out of certain situations. Move schools, Apply to homeschool your children. Do whatever you can to stop your children from having to interact with people that are frightening them outside. That's all I can say about that. And it is an aspect of exploitation and violence. So moving on to the aspects of violence that I wanted to talk about today, youth violence. I'm going to talk about what the World Health Organization, think what you want of them, they still are the primary voice on most of these issues, and they are stating that it's from the ages of 10 to 29. So some of your men, your young men who are not living at home with you, who have got their own places, got children, living with women, you still need to be checking them. You still need to be listening when your young men, their children's mothers are coming to you and talking about violence, because one of the big ones, according to let me just give you the citation here. According to violence.chop, which I will put in the description, intimate partner violence is a serious public health concern for people aged 10 to 24. And it's common in an adolescent. So regardless of whether they've moved out of your house, even if they are in a relationship in their teens, which I don't recommend, you still need to be looking out for those signs of violence. Violence can mean rude language to one another, being unsupportive, bullying within relationships, trying to break somebody's confidence, cheating, lying, um, being passive aggressive. All of these things should not exist within relationships. And if you're not telling your children, look, when somebody's doing this and being narcissistic, and they might be 12, 13, 14, 15, these things are going to affect you in ways that are unimaginable. It will create psychological trauma that right now you might not be able to detect, but at some point it will manifest itself. And you need to have those conversations about partner violence, because it is one of the big ones. It's described as the intentional use of physical force or power to threaten or harm others within those age groups. It's bullying, fighting, threats with weapons, and gang-related violence. Okay. Some other aspects are the socio-economic deprivation and the lack of support services. And it is saying here that the impact of youth violence extends to individuals, families, communities, and societies. I want to talk about the differences between our perception of male violence and female violence amongst the youth. I think it's just as prevalent equally among the genders. And I think people are turning a blind eye to female violence, and they are looking at it as though, because perhaps the physical aspects, maybe women do not have the power to knock somebody out most of the time, or break bones, or make somebody have a serious injury. They're looking at it like, well, we'll take that as a lesser thing, a lesser evil, female violence than male violence. And let me tell you, it is equal, regardless of who the victim is, who the offender, the perpetrator is. Violence needs to be stamped out in our communities. I'm going to say that again. Violence needs to be stamped out in our communities. If you are witnessing youth violence and you're encouraging it, and you're still telling your kid that same old rhetoric from the 80s, well, if someone hits you, you hit them back. You need to be teaching your children a more modern approach to violence. If somebody hits you, you tell somebody, you get yourself out of that situation, teach them how not to wind up in those situations, teach them how to spot people who are potentially violent and are displaying signs of aggression towards them prior to any physical harm. The conversation needs to broaden. It isn't just teaching your kids basic self-defense. You need to understand the signs and symptoms of violence. Children who are pretending to be your friend, who are not showing signs that they are like you, they're not complimenting you, they're not supporting you with your homework, they're not encouraging you to go home on time, they're not encouraging you to do positive activities. This all amounts to forms of violence, and at some point can escalate. If your friends are having mood swings with you and they are verbally violent towards you, there are chances that this could result in physical violence. Teach your children to respect themselves to the point where they are not going to accept anything other than decency from other people, right? So again, some of these conversations are very outdated, especially with regards to youth violence. A lot of parents I know are just saying, well, if it happens, somebody attacks you, um, you got big problems. You've got to be tough. You're telling your kids the wrong thing. You literally are. You're literally not reading what the support services are telling you to do. You're not contacting the appropriate authorities who can come into the schools, who can approach the individuals who are involved prior to incidents occurring. And this all goes back to checking your children's phone. You're talking to new people. I need to know who they are. I need to know who their parents are. You're talking to new people. What have they said? What did that person say? I don't like that. I don't think they should be talking to you about that. And I would like to discuss that with the child's parent. And if this continues, I'm taking this to the authorities. You talk to the child's school if it's people from school, and you tell them my kid's been talking to somebody over thing, and they're using language that I don't appreciate. Nip it in the bud. Stop allowing things to escalate. Stop allowing things that you should be addressing to just fly by. Okay, because these situations wouldn't escalate. Your child is frequenting somewhere after school, perhaps they're walking to the local chicken and chip shop. There's a few boys there who like to rough each other up. They like to grab your clothes. They like to pull you by your clothes and say, oi, oi, come here. If somebody starts talking to you like that, yeah, you need to stop going to that place. You need to go somewhere else. You need to find your way back to your house. You need to find some new friends. These discussions need to be constant. It needs to be daily. And that is why parenting is so difficult. That is why we are asking as families, especially of single parents, for people to get involved. And I know a lot of people don't empathize with single parents. They think, well, you've got yourself in these situations, but who are we to judge other people? We do need to group together as communities and start to stamp out some of these behaviors, these controlling, narcissistic, violent, exploitative behaviors. And this video, again, it was a short one. Thank you for sitting through it. I think I've highlighted some of the major concerns that I have with those two topics, exploitation and youth violence. And I want to add in one more thing, which is about theft and shoplifting, because that's come up as a big one. And, there are cameras everywhere. Your children shouldn't be stealing. If your children are stealing, that you need to be addressing that with them. You need to wonder what their concerns are and why they feel like they're financially unable to purchase items. And most of the time children are not stealing food. They're not hungry. They're doing it because they're lacking resources to buy items that are either comforting for them, or to make them, I don't know, to boost their endorphins. I'm very unsure of why a lot of people have desensitize themselves to stealing. But again, this is something I say to my daughter. When there's a CEO of a company, let's say somebody who works in Marks and Spencer's, and there's a head office, and they know there's a problem in a particular area with stealing, and you're viewed on camera, say perhaps going over there and doing something you shouldn't do, that will affect your potential to get a job, because they're gonna know who you are. And no, they might not report you to the police because they might be tolerant of certain things, but I guarantee when you're wondering at 16, 17, 18 why you can't get a job, that's going to be the reason, because people have literally got files on you doing things that you've only been viewed doing on CCTV and perhaps haven't been approached about. So that's how I encourage my daughter to stay away from certain things, and those are the conversations you can be having with your children as well. Your behavior, just because nobody's talking to you about it and approaching you about it, it doesn't mean it's not being noted down by people who are just absolutely fed up. Like, I'm not going to waste resources approaching somebody about their behavior. I'm just going to say, well, that person can't come into this company, definitely not as an employee. So let's think about that. Let's think about the wider reaching effects of things that we are mollycoddling our children about. Oh, violence and being rude to people and stealing and being aggressive is not so bad. You're not getting caught about it. So let's keep it going. No, let's stop, because it's definitely gone too far. And I'm sure a lot of people will agree with me on this one. And if you do, put a like on this video, put a comment, right, agreed. or share any other opinions or contribute any other factors you've understood about youth exploitation or violence. And please make your own videos as well on the topic. Share your stories and ways that you've prevented your children from ending up in situations, or things that have happened to your children that you want to make other people aware of. Um, and yeah, good luck with that. And please share this to someone who needs to see it. And hopefully there'll be a part two to this, just to talk more broadly about both topics. And have a blessed day. Goodbye.